Good morning, traders. It is 8:01 a.m. Chicago time on Friday, the 11th of July, 2025. Happy Friday, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another TraderBite. A quick reminder that derivatives trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. So, what have we got today? All right, so wrong screen. One moment. Up. Screen 3. There you go. All right. So today we're still kind of coming off a little bit from yesterday's trading, yesterday's rally. We reversed that overnight, and overall the condition is risk off across the board. The NASDAQ seems to have put in a pretty decent excess at the low of 22,831, and crude, which came off pretty well yesterday. Crude was probably the cleanest trade of the bunch. Appears to be staging a bit of a consolidation here in between two key levels. So mild risk off overall. You could see the relative range and a relative volume versus the last 20 days average is pretty high, and so there's a fair bit of activity going on. Expecting some pretty decent opportunities. Crude very, very light, just resting. Again, mild risk off. Sentiment today in the indices, you can see the indices are all all manner of orange this morning. So UK GDP is lower than expected, French inflation higher than expected, Canadian unemployment rate lower than expected. Yesterday, the news that kind of pushed us down is U.S. President Trump announced a 35% tariff for Canada and flagged potential 20% blanket tariffs for other countries. And U.S. set to keep tariff exemption for USMCA goods, according to U.S. official. U.S. President noted EU will receive letter notifying them of new tariff rates by Friday. Vietnam said to be surprised by a 20% tariff and is seeking a lower rate. U.S. Secretary of State Rubio said had a very constructive meeting with China. Odds are high for a meeting between U.S. President Trump and Chinese President Xi. Proposed 50% tariff on Brazil would reportedly halt flow of Brazilian coffee to the U.S. Your Starbucks might cost a little bit more. Today, the calendar is relatively clean and clear. We don't really have much. We have the crop report. We have the crop report coming in at noon Eastern, Baker Hughes rig count at 1, and the monthly budget statement. Later. So this is, let's do majors. Okay. Recent. All right. Okay, so looking at the S&P this morning, really looking a little bit like a multi-distribution profile, but it appears to have finally found its groove here in the 6282 to about 6295 range. The full session VWAP is at 6296. Pretty good volume at 200,000 so far. Remember, yesterday was at not yesterday, Wednesday was at 95. Yesterday was somewhere in that range. The inventory is 91% short. We settled the S&P at 63.24 and have not seen that price since the reopen. The range is pretty strong at 53.50. Again, this ties in with the RN. We're running pretty hot today, so expecting pretty decent opportunities. Let's take a look at the markets themselves. I do want, wrong screen again. It's interesting because Windows keeps switching screens. Wrong screen again. Windows keeps switching screens, and so sometimes this screen is display one, sometimes that's display. It's just like just nuts. Um, anyway, so I would love to spend some time going over, for example, what I did on Wednesday. It's what I used to do in the old TraderBite. Go over yesterday's almost like a post-mortem to show what the plans were versus what they ended up yielding. Yesterday, the expectation is that the ES would push higher. It managed to do that. Pretty easy read as the market clearly V bottomed the day before. Why can't I draw? Here we go. The market V bottomed the day before, you see, and then when it pulled back higher. And so what you have is this W formation. So this zone, I put in this zone as a key over under zone. As long as it does not take that out, I'm looking long, and I'm looking for the all-time high to be pushed, which was put in last Thursday in the where was it, somewhere in the 32 33 range. So I was looking for it to kind of push there. Pretty decent play. The question is, it's all well and good. We can all just look at past charts and talk and say it worked out beautifully, but the problem was it was the trade itself. When you break down the trade and go into your trigger chart and look for what setups would I have to take advantage of this plan, the S&P was not very forgiving yesterday in terms of telegraphing a decent setup to get on that you can really sink your teeth into. So it kind of ran off. My attention was on crude. Crude really did perform amazingly, given that. So this was yesterday's auction. This was the overnight auction. This was the prior day's auction. You could see crude, put in this high up here at 92 or so, went to 94, a liquidity check on the overnight session, and sold off 2 days ago. The day after that, we ended up holding an inside day in crude, holding inside, nice little consolidation here, a double distribution profile. And then when we came in yesterday, we retested this low end. We retested basically the high volume node of the lower distribution, retested the high volume node of the higher distribution, and then came off to break through this lower distribution. This is quite bearish. So my primary scenario that I posted to Convergent Trading's members in the market prep was looking lower. And so the setup was, as soon as it broke down and consolidated the pullback to yesterday's overnight low, you can see the overnight low right there. Yesterday's overnight low yielded a really excellent spot with some really well-defined risk. It had the RTH VWAP there, but it's too early to kind of lean on that. And the goal is to see, hey, do we break the consolidation at this point, the zipper at this point? And as soon as it does, you have protection right above the overnight high. So once it broke through the overnight, the overnight low, once it broke through the overnight low, it was very clear that there was no interest to get back into the overnight range. And then the target became 6650, really 6650, with the open above us, with a very quick check of 8 ticks above the open, and the drive down, hands down, take the buy card off the table, you throw it away, you're looking short, or you're sitting on your hands. And then the question becomes, as we narrow our process, remember, while you're outside of trading, you can look at as many charts and do whatever, but while trading, it's like being a fighter pilot. You cannot have, if you've ever looked at a cockpit on an F-16 or F-18 or something, it's just like very specific displays, very few buttons. This is what you want as a trader. You want to do all of the thinking and the charts and the checking and the homework and the statistics before. And then when you're in a trade, you want to keep your trigger very clear and very simple. And this is where a lot of traders fail because we're watching so many things that I can make an argument for a short just as well as a long. And then sometimes the short has more credibility, but then there's still an argument for a long. So I'm still not pulling the trigger. We don't want that. We want to make it as simple as possible to pull the trigger. This is where that card idea comes in. Buy, sit, sell cards. My job is to pull a card off the table so that I can only take the opposite action. I can take the action on the cards. I can only turn in the card for the trade that is remaining. And then once I've identified that, hey, my bias is short, so no buying, right? Not going to fade anything. Big problem for many traders. Then the question becomes, what area can I trade in where I have a legitimate setup? One of my setups where I can identify risk. So even though, like for the S&P, it ran up yesterday, it didn't give me an area where I could identify risk and lean on a stop to get long. Other than the trade breakouts, I don't trade breakouts. I perform very poorly with breakouts, so I just don't do them. It's not worth it for me. Here, you had a nice push through the overnight low. The overnight stat's done, and now it's just looking for a pullback. The pullback is either to the overnight low or to the DGPs, looking for mid, looking for a consolidation from the overnight session, a zipper, and I have to wait and watch to see how it responds. As soon as I see buyers are just not able to push through, that's a confident short, and I don't need to look at the screen anymore, think about it. We ended up getting down into the 66.50 late in the session. It really flirted quite a bit. You could see it came all the way back to that zipper consolidation before it finally, and then we still had the IB stat, so it made sense to hold. The IB stat was in play, and then finally we get the IB stat. It just pushes up to VWAP, unable to buy through the VWAP, and it just continues, and it finally gets that very slow action. And so it's just, but it is what it is. It's that's how it trades. Okay, back to the ES. So where are we now? So let's talk about now, right? So if we look at what we've done profile-wise, we have created a pretty common structure that we see. Here's your consolidation after the run-up. The expectation is it continues, right? Barring any change, we expect it to continue. We had this big day where it opened at the low, finished with a P shape, short covering, pretty good there. And then from there, we could detect weakness every time it tries to push into those single prints from that last Thursday. It's unable. And then yesterday, finally opens in the range, gets the settlement price, tests down almost into the point of control, and then it turns around, it pushes through. So we get all-time highs, but the all-time highs yesterday only pushed the high by a couple of points and just sat sideways. Now, the thing is, if we came in today and we found ourselves right in here, then new all-time highs would be expected. We came in this morning and we're finding it down here, which means that we're breaking the one-time framing up that we've had. See, the market's been one-time framing up, just stair-stepping up. We've been one-time framing all week, and now it looks like in the next 14 minutes, we're breaking that one-time framing. This takes us from quite bullish in a market imbalance to neutral. Okay, it doesn't mean that the market won't just open and just make new all-time highs. It doesn't mean that. It just means it's a caution flag that buyers are not able to hold these lows on retest. There isn't a bid there to hold in the overnight session. And if we look at the overnight session, we'll see that there's some pretty aggressive selling there on the Asian session, right? Because of these tariffs and so on. So pretty decent selling. We have an impulsive move, a little continuation break of the low, and then we pull back to the full session mid, and then we finally have our true continuation, and now it's consolidating here. So the question here is, on the open, I need to move this in 1 second. This moves down here. This becomes our over under right here, this zone. So the question is, does it run through that green zone you see there? Does it run through and just kind of melt through, or does it pull back, consolidate, and then turn around and take out this high, right? And even so, you still are dealing with prior low a day, and do we get back into the range? So I feel like the ES, from the way it's shaped, the ES looks like it may have a very hard time getting clarity. Likely to see, given the high volume, the wide range, and given that this is news-based, that we're likely to see pretty early whipsaws. So I would wait out the S&P and the NASDAQ this morning on the open. Look at the NASDAQ. These zones have been here a while. These are, considered support zones. This was a resistance zone, and this is kind of a delineation. It's neither resistance nor support, but you could see it pull back to it in the overnight session. It keeps testing and retesting these zones. Essentially, the NQ, one of the easiest ways I find trading the NQ is just using boxes. In fact, across the board, you can just use boxes. There's a tendency for the market to pick a range and trade within it. Then it reprices and picks another range as part of the auction, trades within it, and then it moves. So these are where our stock zone levels come from at Convergent. And so you can see that the NASDAQ's kind of battling in this zone right here. So what do we get in that zone in the NASDAQ? We're very likely to get quite a bit of two-way noise. This morning, it's probably going to be a scalper's paradise. Unless an open drive or an open test drive happens, the NASDAQ's likely to be noisy this morning. Again, I would wait out the first 15 minutes or so, or even the first bracket, which is 30 minutes, to see, does it drive through and come back towards settlement and into the prior day's range, or does it fall back through? Notice the NASDAQ did not make a high yesterday, right? So we had the Thursday high. We made a high earlier this week, but we were not able to make a high yesterday, just like the ES did. And so the NQ managed to move its point of control a little bit higher, but we haven't really moved balance or moved the auction to higher prices. And NASDAQ seems to be running out of steam. And we really saw this from the beginning of the week. I talked about this on Monday, that the NQ and the ES seem to be decoupling, in that the NQ is dragged down by Tesla and a couple of other issues, whereas the ES is actually poised for new all-time highs. And this has kind of played out for the week. That's how it's played out for the week. So the NASDAQ, pay attention to this zone right in here if you're in there. Finally, I'm not going to do scenarios because, like I said, we're in balance. It could go either way. Just know your price map, know where you're likely to participate, and trade on that basis. So here's your box for the overnight session in crude, and we are above that box. We're forming another zipper right there. You see what I mean by these boxes? we're forming another zipper right there. So the question for crude becomes, do we fall back into this box, which brings us into the overnight balance? And if we do we find that sellers are having a hard time keeping a lid? Remember, I've used this a lot over the years. The analogy is one of those beach balls. You know how you push it underwater, and because of the air in it, the water rejects it. It's a lot less dense than water, so water rejects it and wants to pop it up. We're looking for that kind of an action on crude if we are long biased. If it pulls back into this balance and just kind of free form floats, goes back and forth, then you're looking for the overnight session. Not the overnight session. You're looking for the overnight stat to break on the downside. Currently, it looks like it is wanting to come back into this upper box right here. This is what it looks like. Quite a bit to get through in the 67.79, 67.70 to 67.80 area in crude. If it manages to do that, then it's very likely to push right into this stock zone right here, bringing you back to 68.30. That's what that looks like. If it's unable to, then it's likely to, again, as I said, push into yesterday's VPOC, overnight VPOC. If it sits there and consolidates, then the bet is likely to be to the downside, that we are likely to push through that 66.50 again, fill the settlement, and push right through. This is an auction, right? This is an auction, and we are this is an auction, and we are constantly looking for what is the test and how good of a job is it doing testing. That's the most basic element of trading, of the markets and the market movements, to understand the auction. If you don't understand the auction, you really don't have a good basis from which to build whatever else. Good luck today. I will catch you on Monday morning. Hopefully you find these useful. I know not many people, used to be 1,500, 12 to 1,500 people watching. Currently there's 160 or so, which is fine by me. If I'm able to touch touch the way you trade and improve it in any way and have an impact on you, even if it's one person listening, I'm good with it. But if you find this useful, obviously let your other trader friends know about it. Again, we'll try to do this Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I really enjoy doing this. I enjoyed doing this as the owner of a prop shop, running a prop group, and I'm back to it now. And it's just something that makes me happy to do. So it requires a lot of effort, but I'm happy doing this and talking trading, which I love, rather than running businesses, which I also do. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The link is ft71.com/YouTube, all lowercase. If you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe to it. And what it does is it notifies you on your mobile or whatever, if you set it to give you alerts for when the next one is. I always try to announce it 15 minutes, 15, 20 minutes before the show starts to give you a chance to join. Okay. I'll talk to you on Monday. Have a fantastic trading day. Should see some pretty decent action, and have a great weekend. Take care.